You know that feeling of hopelessness where it feels like you're stuck in a loop you just can't break? Well, what if there was a real evidence-based roadmap to find a way out? Today, we're going to walk through a four-pillar method that connects ancient wisdom with some pretty amazing modern neuroscience. It's a practical path forward for your mind and your body.
Let's start right here with one of the most raw, gut-wrenching cries of despair you'll find anywhere. This is from the prophet Elijah, and get this, he said it right after one of the biggest victories of his life. It just goes to show you, feeling completely crushed, to the point of wanting it all to end, that's not some modern problem, and it's definitely not a sign of weak faith. It is a deeply, profoundly human experience.
So, if this feeling is so universal, what is actually happening inside our heads when we feel this way? Let's dive into the science. Because we're not going to talk about hopelessness as some kind of personal failure. No, we're going to look at it as a documented biological state. Because honestly, understanding what's going on is the very first step to changing it. Yeah, our whole understanding of depression has completely changed. We now know it is a very real, very complex neurobiological condition. And there are a couple of key phrases here to really get a handle on. The first is reduced neuroplasticity, which is just a fancy way of saying the brain's ability to learn, adapt, and change gets seriously impaired. And the second is neuroinflammation. The big takeaway? This isn't just a bad mood. It's a physiological state of the brain itself.
This number, wow, it's pretty staggering. Research shows that clinical depression can be linked to a drop in activity of up to 40% in the frontal lobe. Now, why is that a huge deal? Well, your frontal lobe is basically the CEO of your brain. It handles your reasoning, your emotional control, all the big decisions. So if your CEO is only working at 60% capacity, is it any wonder that everything feels completely impossible?
And of course, this biological state directly messes with our thoughts. Aaron Beck, who's basically the father of cognitive therapy, he figured out this pattern and called it the cognitive triad. And it is a toxic, vicious, self-reinforcing loop. You start with a negative view of yourself, which, of course, leads to a negative view of the world around you, which then pretty much guarantees a negative view of the future. Each thought just feeds the next, and it creates this incredibly powerful trap. Okay, so that brings us to the most important question of all, right? If our brains can get biologically and mentally stuck in this downward spiral, how in the world do we get it unstuck? Where do we even begin the journey back to ourself? The answer, it turns out, lies in this four-pillar path. This is our roadmap. First, we're going to look at physical restoration. Then, something I love called brain fertilizer. After that, a really counterintuitive idea, action before feeling. And we'll wrap it all up with renewing your mind. So let's jump right into pillar one by heading all the way back to the prophet Elijah. Because his story, this ancient story, gives us a perfect model for the principle of putting your body first. Just look at this contrast for a second. Elijah, at his absolute lowest, crying out to die, what do you think he was expecting? Probably a spiritual lecture, right? Or maybe a new command to just get back to work. But what did God provide instead? Not a lecture, but sleep. Not a new job, but food and water. It's a radical insight. The very first response to his mental health crisis was physical care. And the sequence here, this sort of divine rehab protocol, is absolutely key. Rest came first, period. Then nourishment, and it was so important he was fed twice. It was only after his body was stabilized that his mind was engaged with that gentle presence, and only then, at the very end, was he given a new purpose. The lesson here is just profound. You can't fix the soul by ignoring the body. Physical restoration has to come first. And that leads us perfectly into pillar two, where this ancient wisdom about physical care gets a major high five from cutting-edge neuroscience. I want you to meet your new favorite acronym, BDNF. It stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, but honestly, brain fertilizer is the perfect way to think about it. It's this amazing protein that helps your brain grow new neurons and strengthen the connections you already have. It is the biological engine of that neuroplasticity we were just talking about. And here's the direct link. Research has shown again and again that depression is associated with way lower levels of this brain fertilizer. And guess what? Pretty much every effective treatment for depression, we're talking therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, you name it, they all seem to work, at least in part, by jacking up your BDNF levels. So what's one of the best ways to boost this BDNF?
Well, a brand new meta-analysis from 2024 gave us a pretty clear answer. While aerobic exercise, like running, is good, and resistance training, like lifting weights, is also good, combining them gives you the biggest bang for your buck. This isn't just about feeling good after a workout. You are literally fertilizing your brain to help it grow its way out of depression. All right, so we've taken care of the body, we've fertilized the brain, but what do you do about that crushing, paralyzing lack of motivation? Well, that brings us to Pillar 3 and a core idea from cognitive behavioral therapy called behavioral activation. Behavioral activation basically flips the script on everything we think we know about motivation. See, depression tells us we have to wait to feel like doing something, wait for the energy or the desire. This principle says, nope, that's backward. Action isn't the result of motivation. Action is the spark that creates motivation. The depressive lie is a waiting game that you will literally never win. I'll act when I feel better. But the CBT truth is so empowering because it gives you something you can actually control. I'll feel better when I act. You don't have to somehow magically change how you feel first. You just have to change what you do, even if it's in the smallest possible way. And the key here is to start ridiculously small. I mean, a 5-minute walk, washing one single dish, making one phone call. Each tiny action you take is like a little piece of evidence that argues against that hopeless story in your head. It creates a tiny spark of energy, which makes the next action just a little bit easier. And that's how you create an upward spiral that breaks the paralysis of what we call learned helplessness, that awful feeling that nothing you do matters. And that brings us to our final pillar, Pillar 4, which ties this all together. We've dealt with the body, the brain chemistry, and our behavior. Now it's time to go after the thought patterns themselves. Now, I want to be really clear. This is not about just thinking positive thoughts or chanting affirmations in the mirror. No way. Cognitive restructuring is a biological process. You might have heard the saying, neurons that fire together wire together. Well, it's true. By intentionally choosing and practicing different thoughts, you are physically building new roads, new neural pathways in your brain. And you know what's absolutely wild? This super modern idea from neuroscience converges perfectly with ancient wisdom. The Apostle Paul, writing in the book of Romans, talks about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And the Greek words he used are incredibly specific. One is anakinosis, which means a complete renovation, like gutting a house and rebuilding it. The other is metamorpho. Sound familiar? It's where we get the word metamorphosis. He's describing the exact same process as CBT. Identify a thought, examine it, and transform it. So the goal of this whole pillar is to become a detective of your own thoughts, to catch those automatic negative thoughts from Beck's cognitive triad, the ones about yourself, the world, and the future, and to actively challenge them by replacing them with what is actually verifiably true. So there they are, the 4 actionable pillars of hope. 1, start with the body, the Elijah model. 2, fertilize your brain, preferably with a combo of exercise. 3, reverse the cycle by putting action before feeling. And 4, renew your mind by restructuring your thoughts. Let's just end with this thought. The original design of our minds, as described in so much ancient wisdom, was not for despair or constant anxiety. So maybe this whole process, maybe recovery isn't this exhausting struggle to become some new person. Maybe it's about clearing away the debris, healing the biology, and finally coming home to the person you were always meant to be.